Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the United District podcast. We're here for the second episode. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by James Robson, the Manchester football correspondent for the Standard. James, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, it's brilliant to have you on, and it's a really interesting time for football and for life in general. We spoke about it last episode. Obviously, different for everyone. How are you coping? How are you doing? Obviously, I've been seeing that you've been publishing many articles. Your work rate certainly hasn't declined at all. You've been doing some excellent work, which I'm sure all United fans are grateful for. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? Look, I think when it first started, it felt, I'm talking purely from a job perspective and a football point of view, it felt a bit like, an international break, that sort of thing. And I know from doing the job for years that during international breaks, club fans, the interest towards the international football just is nothing like as high as it is for during the normal season. A lot of people look at those breaks as a real sort of like dead period for them. So it felt a little bit like that to begin with, and you're used to a couple of weeks of that, and you've got feature ideas that you had in the bag, preparing for it, that sort of thing. But as this goes on and on, as in months, weeks and weeks and months, without actually anything happening, it becomes more of a struggle. There's no doubt about that. But of course, when you cover a club like United, I also cover City as well. When you cover clubs like this, there's always something going on.
Yeah, and certainly Manchester United fans' lust for transfer news, I don't think ever gives up. There's always a constant demand for stuff on that, I'm sure, as you're very, very aware of. So we'll talk a little bit about transfers in just a little while. We'll start off talking about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think obviously the lockdown came at a good and a bad time, in that obviously Manchester United were enduring a good run of form before the lockdown obviously came into place, and football the season ceased to continue for now at least. So in that sense, it was a shame that we couldn't keep that momentum going, but at the same time, it's given Solskjaer some security. Is that, am I right in saying that? Has Solskjaer now got a good security now? Is the Pochettino talk, it's obviously died down? What are the Manchester United boards, what are their standpoint on that at the moment?
Well, look, what I've got to say about this, I take your point totally, but I've got to say, from United's point of view, their stance has been the same throughout. Even at the lowest ebbs, their stance has been absolutely resolute that they're sticking by Solskjaer. And I know we hear that sort of thing all the time, and the dreaded vote of confidence, all that sort of thing. I don't think they ever really gave him that dreaded vote of confidence, if you like. It's just been this constant, no, we believe that we're on the right track. We expected it to be rocky this season. We knew that because we'd taken these hard decisions in the summer. Everyone at the club, I think, accepted that they'd left themselves short in the summer, and that wasn't ideal. But they decided that if that was necessary, in order to get this dressing room that Solskjaer's trying to build, if that was necessary, then they'd do it, and they'd take that bitter pill for if it was a season, because they really were convinced that Solskjaer's ideas were right. And I've got to say, from my personal point of view, watching the club, I felt it was very difficult to argue with anything Solskjaer was coming up with in terms of ideas, in terms of vision. I think most United fans would look at it and say, well, he's saying the right things. He's saying the sort of things that were successful for Fergie and for Busby, sticking to those traditions. But the problem was on the pitch. You can't deny for much of the season, it has been pretty bad. There have been some real low points during the season. Some high points as well, but there have been a lot of low points, and there's no denying the fact that I think they're going to get a historically low points, it looks like, for the Premier League era. So you can't ignore these things. But again, his ideas seem right. The players he let go, I don't think anyone would argue with. Even Lukaku, and I wasn't one of the Lukaku bashers. I know a lot of people were. But I thought, if he's not your player, if you don't see him as the sort of player that you want to build your attack around, then let him go. I thought the big mistake was not replacing him. But they did try to replace him. So, they did try to sign Dybala. There's no getting away from that. They did try to do it, but they didn't manage to get it done. So the ideas, I thought, have always been there. And I think the club, the board, have always felt that as well. But you can't. At the end of the day, your situation is always going to be dictated by results on the pitch. And I totally agree with you that this break, given the run United were on, has served Solskjaer well. Can you imagine if, for instance, that City game, if they'd had a beating, and a bad beating in that City game? Imagine if they'd got a 0-0 away at Lask, or lost 1-0 away to Lask, something like that.
Yeah.
And then you had this break. They always say, you don't want to lose. There's always that first international break. No, the October or November sort of international break when people think, well, that's when chairman can get trigger happy if results aren't going the right way. You don't want to lose that game before that international break. And yet, if he'd been on a bad run going into this elongated pause of the season, then those stories would only escalate. But I've got to say, from United's point of view, they have been the same throughout all season. It's been a case of we believe in him, we believe in what we're doing.
Yeah, so does that standpoint that the board have sort of taken in that sort of continued support, does that differ from what we saw with Moyes and Van Gaal and Mourinho? How does it differ from that support that was given? Or does it differ?
With Moyes, again, they were absolutely certain they were going to stick with him, because I think after a few months there was talk of can he last this, because I don't think anyone could believe just how bad it got and how quickly it went like that. And let's say if Solskjaer had been the guy who took over from Fergie and it unravelled that quickly, if United had this season after Fergie retired, I think you could say there'd be a lot of heat on Solskjaer. But given what's happened over the past 6-7 years, he came in at a lower base anyway, so that helped. But with Moyes, look, they gave him a 6-year contract. They absolutely thought this was the man, and they thought, it might actually. I don't think anyone expected at the club for him to just come in, hit the ground running, and for them to fly. And there was an acceptance that maybe they wouldn't win the title in his first season, because I think there was an acceptance. I don't personally subscribe to this, but I think there was an acceptance that Fergie's last title-winning squad maybe wasn't the best squad in the league. Now, I think a side that wins a title by 11 points, as much of a genius as the manager was, I think that was a very good side. And I still look at those players and what they went on to achieve afterwards. Evra went off to Juventus, and what did he win? 2 more titles with Juve, got to Champions League final. That was not a bad team. I think that's really been overplayed. I accept that Fergie got the best out of them, but I think that has been overplayed. But so they accepted that there might be a little dip under Moyes, but it got so bad so quickly that I think they felt they had to do something. Also, there is the debate over whose appointment he actually was. Was he Fergie's? Was he Woodward's? I don't think anyone has totally claimed responsibility for that. So there's a difference there. So in terms of Van Gaal, again, all the noises behind the scenes were that they were supporting him. I can't say that. I'm not sure that I would compare it to what they said about Solskjaer. But you've got to remember that in the season that Van Gaal ended up going, in the December, they were trying to convince him to sign a new contract. So, that shows that there was a certain amount of faith in him. But when Guardiola pops up at City and Jose Mourinho's out of a job, again, circumstances force you down a certain road. And I think the feeling was that if Guardiola's at City, the only who can actually stop him? How can we fight that? And Mourinho was the man. And as for Mourinho, again, look, that just unravelled so badly around the December. And the United don't like to sack during season. They would ideally want to do all of that sort of stuff at the end of a season, but that just unravelled so quickly. They felt they had to act. So they're all very different cases. But given the low base that Solskjaer came in at, the low expectations, the kind of acceptance that he probably had to rip up that squad, I think they accept that he's doing a lot of hard work and thankless work that will give you short-term pain, but hopefully for the long-term benefit. And I don't want to compare it to the Fergie years, but in those early years with Fergie, the likes of Bobby Charlton said everyone could see behind the scenes what he was doing, even if it wasn't necessarily playing out on the pitch. And there might be a bit of that here.
Yeah. Just moving on to a question from Twitter quickly, which actually sort of ties into what you've just talked about there. It's from a Tactic Fanatic who says, what's Ole's role in the coaching? Basically, to what extent does he control his staff, and to what extent are they free to take initiative?
Well, before he even got the job on a permanent basis, I was talking to people who knew his work in Norway, and he was described as a manager, not a coach. He himself has admitted that he's not. He doesn't do really that sort of full on coaching on the training pitch. But Fergie wasn't doing that. I think recently Rio Ferdinand said you didn't see him on the training pitch doing that sort of thing. He was the manager, but everything came down from him. And that I think is the same with Solskjaer. He's got a team there that he really trusts. But they're his ideas. But they've got a lot of faith in Kieran McKenna. They think he's a top coach. Michael Carrick, of course, knows the club. Everyone's got huge respect for him. He's one of those players who was so intelligent as a player. You naturally think he would suit being a coach. Loves the game as well. So they're the guys who are out on the training pitch implementing Solskjaer's vision.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on from Solskjaer for now. I'm sure you'll get sick of this name by the end of all this. Jadon Sancho, also a player heavily linked with Manchester United. It seems to be narrowing down to the point where he seems destined for United. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I'd always beware of that sort of thing because we've been down this road many times, not just with United, but many clubs, and it feels like yes, and then suddenly no. A couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago now, it felt like that with Griezmann. It felt really similar with Griezmann, and it was around this sort of time of year, and there were noises coming out from Griezmann's camp that it was a case of it's just a case of putting pen to paper now. Everything had been agreed, but then that didn't happen. That same summer, there was Morata, who ended up going to Chelsea. They were very keen on him and signed Lukaku in the end, who was their favoured choice. So they've usually got more than one, is what I would say, when they're looking at players. It feels like that. Look, they wanted him last summer, definitely, but he wasn't so desperate to leave.
Yeah.
And I guess, he could look at them last year and think, do I want to, at this stage of my career, do I want to be taking a risk on a club who've got a bit of a reputation, a growing reputation for players going on the decline when they go there. But I think looking at it this year, they're a far more attractive proposition. You look at that forward line and you imagine he's thinking, I could link up with Rashford and Greenwood and Martial. That's a really exciting forward line. It's a young forward line that's going to grow together as well. That's something I could imagine that would really appeal to someone. It's got a feel of in a couple of years, people saying that this is like slight exaggeration, the Messi, Suarez, Neymar sort of thing. But it's that sort of three-pronged, really fearsome attack like Liverpool have got now, of course. You can imagine him wanting to be a part of that. I think circumstances are suiting United. As Solskjaer said last week, he said that they could exploit the market. I think, look, I appreciate the wording wasn't ideal, but of all the clubs around the world, United will be one of the ones who come out of this in the healthiest position. They're always confident that they can financially they can challenge anyone for a player, but maybe that'll be even more so now. It feels like it's heading in that direction. But with these sort of things, you've got to wait till it's signed.
Yeah, we've got a question from Twitter again here from Keith, who asks, is there an alternative if we don't sign Sancho? Obviously, not actually that many names have been mentioned. It's all been sort of focused on Jadon Sancho. Have you got any names for us that would be, perhaps an alternative to Sancho?
Well, I think he is very much the first choice. There's no doubt about it. Hakim Ziyech was one that they did look at and chose not to actually even bid for. That was in January when Chelsea got him, of course. So that's a sign that they were looking at and have been looking at others. I think Werner can play there, can't he? He can play wide. That's another one they've been looking at. But I think Sancho is the first choice. We're told that Solskjaer by January has a list of 3 to 5 players per position that he's looking for, but generally never wants to go beyond the second choice. So, but yeah, in terms of concrete names, no. But like I say, I think Sancho is very much the first choice there.
Yeah, okay. Just one last thing on the sort of winger situation. Alexis Sanchez, obviously you did an article on him a couple of days ago, I believe, and you said he's not in Solskjaer's plans, but reluctant to walk away. What do you see the solution to this massive wage bill problem that United have got with Alexis Sanchez?
There isn't a way out of it. I think you're basically at a point that no club is going to take on those wages. I can't. Maybe if you went to China, but I don't think he's overly, or certainly wasn't interested in that last year. That's the only way you're gonna manage to get him out of the club without making a loss. One way or another, they're going to make a loss on this, and whether it's a case of he goes out on loan again, but I'm not even sure how keen he is on that, other than if it's Inter. So it's a case of even if he goes on loan, you've still got to pay an enormous portion of those wages because around the world clubs just cannot afford that sort of money. It's around, we believe, upwards of £400,000 a week. Even if, let's say, the United players took a 30% pay cut, and I don't even know how that would actually affect Sanchez by not being at the club, but even then, his salary still takes him out of the reach of just about anyone in the world. Yeah. So, yeah, I think maybe they buy it out, because it's not even a good look, is it? If you just say, look, see out the rest of your contract on loan anywhere that we can get you, and we'll pay whatever it is, 2/3 or who knows of your salary. It doesn't look good, does it? It's just kind of like constantly hanging over there, and then by the end of the following season, it's going to be what do they do with him this summer? It's one of those that you think some sort of payout might just be the best way to get this done with. The fact that Solskjaer let him go last summer, knowing that he didn't have a replacement, knowing that he was short up front, and United have been short up front for most of this season, and he was still happy to let Sanchez go, I think that tells you everything you need to know about where he figures in his plans. And after the strides they've made this season, to suddenly bring him back makes no sense whatsoever.
I did find that decision interesting, to be honest, because obviously, as you say, no replacement. I think that move actually happened after the window was shut over here. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
So it's hard to see any way back. It just made me think, what was the actual point in letting him go to Inter? Obviously, they're going to get some money back either through a loan fee or a percentage. I'm not sure which one of those was it. Was it a percentage? Are they paying a percentage of Sanchez's wage?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah. So I find that interesting, just because I think it would be maybe useful. I say useful, obviously, been a disaster of a player for us, but useful to have a bit of depth around. But as you say, obviously, probably no way back from now. We'll move on to the striker situation, another really interesting one. Harry Kane's been mentioned, heavily throughout. You mentioned in an article recently about a 4-man shortlist, which was Haaland, Kane, Dembele and Werner. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think you could. They certainly like Jota as well at Wolves. Those were 4 names that 4 players they'd been looking at. I don't think they'll be the only ones.
Yeah, do you think? Who do you think's the most probable here? Obviously, Odion Ighalo comes into it as well as a backup sort of option to those sort of 4 bigger names. Which one of those 4 would you say is the most probable?
I think it's a really difficult one. I think if Haaland becomes available, United are there. They'll be challenging. Whether they can beat Real Madrid to him is another matter entirely. In Germany, I saw today they're saying that that buyout doesn't kick into effect until, is it next summer? I think they were saying.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean to say that he's not available anyway. So yeah, I think United will be there. They're certainly watching him to see what Real Madrid do, because there are no hard feelings there at all. And he was obviously the top choice, and they thought well, they were pretty confident they could get him in January, and that all went away. That would be interesting. Yeah, again, Kane. Solskjaer loves him. Woodward loves him, and has done pretty much ever since he's been in charge of United's transfers. But I couldn't see it at that money. If Spurs are serious about 200 million, 200 plus, I couldn't see it. And even with United spending power to have him and Sancho, and still trying to bring in someone like a Grealish, I think that might even be beyond them, even if they did get the money for Paul Pogba this summer. So yeah, more and more I look at Ighalo and think he makes sense, just because and I might be in a minority here, but I think Martial has made huge strides, and I just don't know that he. So if they were to bring in Harry Kane starts every week. There's no doubt about it. He's the best striker in the country, one of the best in the world. He starts every week. Yeah. So what happens then to Martial? Do you then go back to the Martial you had when Lukaku was ahead of him, and when Zlatan was ahead of him? I don't know that Martial is the sort of player that suits being in and around the fringes. I think he's thrived on the fact that Solskjaer's given him the number 9 shirt and said, "You're leading my attack." And I think they've had results out of that, and I think they would have had a lot more out of it if he'd have played in a better side this year, the one that created more chances, and if he'd played in a side that had Rashford in it all season. I think he would have had a lot more goals. And his goals this season have been good. So I personally wonder if it's the right move to bring in someone who's actually going to displace him, and not just say, an Ighalo, he can play backup. But then, if someone like Haaland or Kane becomes available, how do you not sign one of them? Because you can. Kane, as we know, he's a cast iron cert to get you 30 goals a season, and Haaland looks like he's going to be an absolute superstar.
Yeah. We'll just move on from that again. You mentioned very briefly there, Paul Pogba, about his sale and what money that could generate and how that could affect, obviously, our plans. The situation with Paul Pogba at the minute is, well, what is it? It seems to all be positive. He's done the United podcast, obviously, and stuff like that. It's all looking a little bit brighter. Has the arrival of Bruno Fernandes affected Pogba's future, do you think?
When Fernandes... Look, I've felt all season that this would be his last season. I don't think there's been much said that would make you think otherwise, as in, from the sort of things that Raiola's come out with. Look, he wanted to go last summer and they wouldn't let him, or I say wouldn't let him, they would have let him if someone had offered 150 million. No one came anywhere near that. And therefore, it feels a bit like it's the same situation here. Look, Pogba and Fernandes in the same midfield, I think would be exciting for anyone. Pogba and Fernandes, you're rivaling Silva and De Bruyne, for City. With those two together, that would be absolutely lethal for United. So that's got to be a real temptation to see if that can work. But I just don't know. Do you want to carry on with Pogba given what they've seen over the past couple of years? Look, I've not been a Pogba basher, because I do believe he's one of the best midfielders in the world, and I think he's been unfairly criticised at United. I think he's put in a lot of really good performances. I think his stats are generally right up there, but I don't know how at United you can put up with someone. Last summer that I thought it didn't look good at all. Him did the whole, I think it's time for a new challenge, that sort of thing. Things his agent comes out with all the time. That is not a good look for a club like United to have that going on, and it's not good for a dressing room that Solskjaer has been so carefully nurturing and trying to rebuild. So I think he would have to absolutely knuckle down. He'd have to tell his agent, "Look, I don't want you making these comments about me anymore." And it's felt a little bit like that might have changed a little bit after that stuff Raiola came out with on Twitter about Solskjaer in, when was it, February or whatever it was. And I don't know if that was, I don't know this one, maybe that was Pogba telling him, "Look, you've gone a bit far with this one." His situation, as I see it, is I still think if someone comes in, no one's going to come in at 150 million now, but I don't know, maybe if someone came in anywhere near that, yeah, I think he goes.
Yeah, just wondering what you make of the obvious debate between him and Graham Souness, which has gone very sort of public now. Obviously, responding to each other publicly. Pogba obviously saying he didn't actually know who he was, couldn't put a name to the face. What do you make of that little dispute?
I wouldn't. I mean, that sounds awful for someone to say that about Graham Souness, who's certainly one of the greatest midfielders that British football's ever produced, but probably European or world football too. However, I've got to say it might not have been such an obvious insult, and also in Pogba's defence, you could say that he's been wound up somewhat by Souness's constant criticism. But I remember once, I think I was talking to, I was at a press conference with, it was Theo Walcott, and this was a few years back now, and he was saying that there were some of the kids coming through at Arsenal, as in coming through the ranks at Arsenal, who didn't know who Thierry Henry was. So that Pogba doesn't know a player from the 70s and 80s. I don't think it's as big an insult as it may sound. But yeah, look, I know, I can see where Souness is coming from. I think Souness is one of the best, if not the best pundit out there. I think he's absolutely honest. I don't think he says anything with malice. I think he's absolutely genuine in what he says, and I can understand why he gets frustrated with Pogba, because I think most people watching Pogba get frustrated. Yeah, from someone who watches United as often as I do, I can see the difference that Bruno Fernandes has made to that midfield by just being so direct and instantly. He moves the ball so quickly, and that's what that midfield has missed for so long now. And it's absolutely transformed United as a team. It's incredible that one player could do that. And I don't think Bruno Fernandes is the best midfielder in the world, but he has managed to do that to United. Talent-wise, I think Pogba's better, but the amount of times when you see him get the ball and he drags it back and that sort of thing, and it's absolutely infuriating to watch. And you just think, I wish you'd do the simpler things more often. And I can imagine someone like Souness is imagining playing with him and getting really frustrated when he sees him do those sort of things, and not absolutely boss a game like he should be all the time. So I get his point there. I totally get his point. And likewise, though, I can understand why Pogba would be annoyed if someone keeps having a pop at them on TV. I think it's all fair, to be honest. Both ways.
No, I think I agree with you on that, to be honest. Goes both ways, doesn't it? Just another name that's been thrown around quite a lot alongside the likes of Sancho, Jack Grealish, obviously flaunted government lockdown a few weeks ago. Obviously that was splashed around on social media and the papers alike. Has that changed Manchester United's stance on Grealish, like some have suggested?
Not from what I've heard, no. Not yet. I don't think. Look, it wasn't good at all. There's no doubt about it, and it was quite apart from anything else. It was incredibly embarrassing for him and for Aston Villa. But it's at this time it was terrible. And you don't want to see that. And I'm sure United weren't impressed with it, just like pretty much the rest of the country. But he's a huge talent. And he's someone that they have liked for a long time. I think going back even to last summer. But I think playing in the Premier League with Villa was important to him. He'll come at a cheaper price than James Maddison, who's the other one like that who they like. So no, from what I can gather, they do still like him.
Okay. We'll just move on to a bit further back in midfield from Grealish and Pogba, the holding midfielder role. MUFC Mo asks, are we interested in Thomas Partey?
To be honest, I keep reading about it and I keep seeing it, but I don't know. I've not had anything concrete on that myself. I wonder about. I think from what Solskjaer said, it's very much he wants the attack sorted. So I don't know that it's likewise. Centre backs. Solskjaer loves Koulibaly. They are watching De Ligt still to see if Juve decide to get rid of him this summer. But a centre back isn't a priority either. It's very much he wants that. So he wants a centre forward. He wants a right winger. He wants that sort of like number 10 attacking midfielder.
Just a couple more names here as well. Jude Bellingham, who obviously heavily linked with United, and then obviously seemed as if he was going to Dortmund. Any more on that? Is there still a chance of United getting Bellingham?
I've got no more on it other than they're trying to they're working on it, trying to get it done. I think in terms of there's no issue in terms of meeting Birmingham's price, which I think is between 20 and 30, I think, something like that. It's really down to the player now. In terms of United's interest, he's one of those where he is seen as such an incredible talent at such a young age that they've just got to get him, or certainly got to go for him. You know, you could put him on that same sort, you know, kind of like the Rooney sort of thing, like Michael Owen, who they tried to get before Liverpool got him, Gareth Bale as well. You know, there are those young players who come through that United just feel obliged that they've got to get them. But yeah, nothing new there.
Okay. Moving even further back the pitch, we've got back in goal. Obviously, a big debate this season over David De Gea's form. You know, people suggesting he's beyond it, he's past it. And obviously, on the polar opposite to that, you've got Dean Henderson, the Manchester United loanee, obviously thriving at Sheffield United. What do you see happening with that? Because I can't see personally De Gea being shoved out the door and Henderson becoming number one. But that's what some have suggested they like to happen. What do you see happening there?
No, I don't see that happening. I agree with you. You don't give De Gea the sort of contract they just gave him after all the uncertainty over whether he'd stay there, to then just ship him out or have him as your reserve. You know, David De Gea isn't your reserve; he's your first choice goalkeeper. I take the point that his form has dipped. There's no doubt about that. It feels like that. I've got to say with De Gea, I've always felt with him that he was one of those who was better the more active he was. His great seasons were under Moyes, weren't they? And under Van Gaal and under Mourinho, when United had a lot of issues. Their defence has been good this season. They've not, they've really shored it up, and Wan-Bissaka and Maguire have had a huge difference, made a huge difference there. So I've not checked this out in terms of the amount of shots they're conceding, but I always felt with him that he was at his best when there were games where he was having like 5 to 10 shots on goal and he was just pulling out these wonder saves. I look back at the likes of Van der Sar. I thought was the best goalkeeper I've ever seen for a keeper who doesn't actually have to do anything. He'd maybe make one save a game, but he'd be there and he'd pull it off. He was great like that. Whereas Schmeichel was a bit more De Gea-ish, where he's all action, what have you. And at a club traditionally, at a club like United, that concentration is the huge thing, because you're not going to have many shots at you, because generally they dominate possession and they're generally on the attack. And I've always felt that might be where De Gea's weak point is, if it's just one or two and then maybe his concentration just lapses a little bit. But no, I don't think I think it's far too soon to be saying he's past it. He's certainly not past it. I think probably more of an issue is that you look at goalkeepers now and you look at Alisson and Ederson as what it is to be a goalkeeper now, which is they're just absolutely brilliant with their feet, and De Gea just isn't.
Yeah, so what do you think happens with Dean Henderson then? Because obviously had a great season at Sheffield United. I think no one can deny that. Obviously, England looking at him, I'm sure, even as a possible replacement for Pickford, who's come under a lot of fire for some of his goalkeeping this season. Do you think it's as simple as Henderson going straight back on loan and simply waiting for De Gea to sort of move into an age where he's no longer going to be the starting keeper?
I think it should be. I mean. No, I don't see Henderson going on loan for 2-3 years. I certainly don't see that. But I think him going back to Sheffield United next season, I don't think there should be an issue there. In terms of his ambitions as a young goalkeeper, I'd imagine Sheffield are meeting them at the moment in terms of his immediate ambitions. He could be in Europe next year with them. He's been one of the best goalkeepers this season, in one of the best teams in the league this season. So, from that kind of point of view, I'd imagine his personal ambitions are being met for now. I know that his absolute ambition is to be United's number one. There's no doubt about that. Maybe if he has another year out at Sheffield and he has another brilliant season, then there's going to be a really difficult decision to make for United another summer on. I don't think it should be an issue this season.
Okay, just moving on to the final question from Twitter. Miles asks, is there any news on the Smalling situation? Obviously had a good season at Roma. Is Smalling going to come back, or do you think the ultimate goal is to move him on?
I think he'll go. Solskjaer did say, I think Solskjaer said not that long ago that, he's got a future here, but again, they let him go. So no, he doesn't. You don't let a player go. Chris Smalling isn't Dean Henderson. Chris Smalling is a guy in his late 20s, knocking on 30. I'm not sure how old he is now. You keep him if you want him, and they didn't. So yeah, I would imagine he goes this summer, and that would be one of those loans that have really worked out well because he's only enhanced his reputation. So there would probably be more buyers for him this summer, and his value should have gone up.
Yeah, just some other mentions of Deadwood, because obviously Solskjaer's done quite well, or some people would say he's done quite well clearing out the Deadwood, but there's obviously still a bit of work to do. Someone who I think would definitely be considered Deadwood at this point, Jesse Lingard, obviously now represented by Mino Raiola. Mention of a move to Italy. Do you see that materialising and Lingard moving on this summer?
It's a difficult one with Lingard, and it's a real shame because I think what a year or so ago, around about the World Cup, he looked like he was finally achieving his realising his potential, and he was one of those players who got a lot of stick at United from United fans, and let's not forget that United fans were giving Scott McTominay a lot of stick not too long ago as well. So I think there's a lot to be said for showing patience with younger players, and a lot to be said for the personalities and characters of players like Lingard and McTominay to come through that. But there's no doubt that over the past year, Lingard has struggled. He's had a bad time of it. And when you bring in someone like Fernandes and you see the impact he's made in a sort of position that Solskjaer really hoped Lingard would be able to this season. Because going into the season, Lingard, his role was really crucial to the system that Solskjaer wanted to play, this 4-2-3-1. He saw Lingard at the centre of those three behind the striker, and leading the press for United, bundle of energy, creative, can score goals, and we've just not seen that. You can't deny it. We've not seen that this season. It could be one of those where you feel like it might just need a part in other ways. Lingard himself might just need another club to go and show what he can do, because he can. I know that a lot of United fans are critical of him, but around the World Cup when he was getting the England squad, I thought he got to a point where he'd overtaken, or was certainly pressing Dele Alli, doing the job he was doing. I feel for him, because it's a shame when certainly someone as well who loves United and he's come through the ranks. He's really popular at the club as well and in the dressing room, and I think it's a shame when your own fans start to turn on you as well, and you just wonder maybe it's time to move on.
What do you think of his sort of off the field antics? Obviously, a lot of people are very critical of Paul Pogba for similar reasons, and Lingard gets the same stick as you've mentioned there. Quite a lot of people have completely turned on him, partly because of his on-field, but also partnered with his off-the-field antics. Do you think that's affected his popularity amongst fans?
I think it's similar with him and Pogba, where if people are looking for something to have a go at you for, seeing Instagram videos and that sort of thing, that seems to wind people up. But I also think it probably winds up a certain generation. But my generation is not one of Instagram and social media. And that's the footballers that I grew up watching obviously weren't on social media, of course, and maybe that's the same with a lot of people in the media. They're of an age where I wouldn't say don't understand it, but the fact of the matter is now that young footballers growing up now are more engaged with TikTok, which I've never even used, Snapchat, things like that. They're more engaged with that than they are with traditional media. And this is just how they express themselves. And it is the sort of thing that could totally wind up people who aren't of that generation. I don't think it's not fair. This is the point. But with football, it's always been the same thing. And the thing is, if you're doing it on the pitch, it doesn't really matter what you're doing off the pitch. You won't get that criticism. And the problem is, like for instance, Pogba doing it while he's out injured all this time. Look, there's no reason why he shouldn't be posting videos just because he's injured. But when you see him posting videos playing basketball when he's got a bad ankle, then you start to wonder what on earth is going on here. And when you see him dancing at a wedding, pretty much the same day that Solskjaer's told us he's got a cold, again, you're wondering what's going. Those sort of things don't look good. And obviously, what went on with Lingard last summer, that wasn't good either. It's just not a good look. But I can't get too bothered about someone posting funny videos on Instagram. It's not really, I'm more bothered about what they're doing on the pitch. And also, if they're doing bad things off the pitch, that's a different thing entirely. I think you look at, for all the stick of someone like Lingard gets, I think you only have to look at him physically to see how absolutely serious he is about his profession and about the job he does. You look at him as a physical specimen, and he is an absolute athlete. And that to me shows me how serious he is about his job, about playing football. This isn't like the old days where he's going down the pub straight after a match on a Saturday and staying in it for who knows how long. This is someone who is living the job, because you only have to look at him to see that.
One last player before we wrap things up. Bit of an interesting player in some ways. Obviously, was part of the horrible, I think that's a good way to describe it, summer that Jose Mourinho had with alongside Lee Grant and Fred. It's Diego Dallo, who obviously looking like a promising right back who we thought by now might be in the starting 11. Obviously, Aaron Wan-Bissaka came in. He's been phenomenal. I think everyone can agree what a phenomenal player Wan-Bissaka is. But what does the future hold for Diego Dallo?
It's a tough one, that, because I remember it was around sort of probably sort of February-ish, we started to get wind of the idea that United were after a right back. And I remember when I heard it, I thought, that sounds odd, because I thought they've only just bought Dallo, who Mourinho had made a big deal about the fact that this is a star for the future. I thought they've got Ashley Young, who can still do a job there, and he could be the one to help bring on Dallo. I thought if you got those two, I don't see that as a priority. Right back, I thought they need creativity in midfield. Need a centre back desperately. Those was, and I thought maybe they need a left back as well, because of course you got Luke Shaw's ongoing injury and what have you, and form, what have you. So I thought those would be more the areas, but you only need to see the difference that Wan-Bissaka's made to realise that. And I think you kind of, given the way United have been over the past 6-7 years, you kind of do get stuck in this idea of, well, he's good enough, he's good, he'll do, and that I think is something that Solskjaer is changing in the case of, well, no, it won't do. We need top quality, and they'd spent a decent amount of money on Dallo, and then break the record to sign Wan-Bissaka, and you only have to see the step up in class that he's brought and how much better they are, and I think he's going to get even better. So if Dallo is happy to be understudy to him, then let's see how good he can be. But you look at Wan-Bissaka, and he's United's right back for what, 6-7, if not more. I don't want to say 10 years because loads changes, but he's United's right back for the foreseeable future because he's that good. So anyone they were to bring in is going to be back up to him. If Dallo's happy doing that, then great. But I don't know how happy he will be, how happy anyone would be. But that's a job for Solskjaer to keep everyone happy there. But but he is the cover right now. So I'm not sure who they've got coming through right. But at the moment, so long as he's happy being that, and he's been injured most of the season as well, hasn't he? He's had long periods out. So but it's a difficult job for anyone coming through behind Wan-Bissaka because he's immovable.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Been really interesting to hear you talk about all these topics, obviously. Pleasure to have you on. Thank you for coming on. Any last words you've got for anyone listening?
No, I just hang in there. Football will be back hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, lovely. Stay safe, James. Thank you.
All the best, you too.